transformation, business model reinvention, these are just a few concepts and initiatives that indicate change and movement for companies. To find out exactly how companies are implementing this change, Ken Kuykendall spoke with Jeff Endress at this year's International Tax Conference. Here's our conversation.
So Jeff, it's great to get together with you here at our International Tax Conference in California.
Thank you.
I know you just hosted a panel, honestly, talking about sort of this intersection of tax and underlying business strategy and how tax can really be an enabler of our clients' organizational strategy, their commercial strategies. So maybe I'll start with, what were the high points of the panel you led?
It's fascinating. So we're here with about 170 of our clients, and they're across all industries, all sectors. And one of the most common themes is business disruption is happening to all of them, okay? And so it's unavoidable to them as tax departments in these different companies. And what we're seeing is they're also stretched thin from a resource perspective. They have to deal with the provision, they have to deal with compliance. And at the same time, they've got more business disruption than they've ever had as an organization. And so they're trying to figure out how do you manage the day job along with all the business change that's happening, and at the same time make tax a strategic advisor along the way.
Yeah, and that's like a new piece of information we're seeing every day that's like a critical job of our tax executives. Like I go back and look, and so many times we think about managing risk, we think about getting returns done, we think about managing audits, dealing with tax provisions, but these days, like, they're a key part of our clients' organizational strategy, their commercial strategy, how they pull that stuff together. So maybe let's double click a little bit in there. Talk about how tax can be an activator of business strategy.
Yeah, and I think if you really think about what our tax departments are trying to do today, it's really become aligned with the business more proactively. So historically, a lot of the business changes would happen, people would bring in tax at the end and say, okay, is there anything we need to worry about? And oftentimes, tax could have become the bearer of bad news in those conversations. So it's really been fascinating to watch us as advisors and our clients go along this journey and try to become more strategic partners with the business. And how do they do that? You know, they're starting to really understand what's happening with the business themselves so that they can be more involved on the front end with the business initiatives that are happening. And then we as advisors are doing the same thing. So you know we're taking a big push to try to help our tax clients get more involved on the front end of these conversations. And guess what? Oftentimes tax can be the bearer of good news instead of the bearer of bad news. And so it's a really involving the thinking of the clients, getting them more involved early on, and then having them show how tax can be a valuable part of the business change that's happening.
Yeah, so many times as tax people, we feel like we're dealing with a finished product and we're trying to figure out how to achieve the tax answer we want. Imagine if you move forward and you're actually part of like activating strategy and you can sort of mold your facts around what you want to try and accomplish, which is what you guys are trying to do. So maybe let's carry along that path. What are some of the things out there, economic forces, et cetera, that are impacting our client strategy? I go around and talk to a lot of people and make the point that it's a really dynamic business environment right now. There's so much going on. Maybe hit on some of the themes that are driving that.
There's a couple different macro level things that are happening that people are well aware of, right? We have a high inflation rate that's going on. The interest rate environment is extremely difficult right now, and that, from a tax perspective, that causes us a lot of problems. So when you think about the high cost of capital, one, that has a significant impact on the deal market for our clients. Two, just from a core tax technical perspective, the higher the interest rates, that has impact on the way that the international clients can use their foreign tax credits or other attributes. The other thing I've seen a lot of pressure in the system on, Ken, is access to capital within their own organizations. So although we had tax reform that made cash freely deployable with a DRD, it still doesn't mean it's easy to get to in all these countries. And so a lot of our clients are in 50, 100 countries. There's a significant focus from the Treasury perspective on, okay, I have money that's in China, I can't get it out. I have money in Argentina, I can't get it out. I've got money in the UK, we don't have the ability to get that capital out. The pressure on that is a lot more extreme than it's ever been because they're not more willing to borrow in today's high interest rate environment. So when I think about macro impacts on capital, it's inflation and it's high interest rates. When I think about what's happening from a business perspective, massive change is happening to all these clients, and what they're trying to do is become the business of the future. And so I know we've done a survey with our CEOs. Did they think their business will survive in 10 years? And 45% of them said no, they're probably not going to survive if they don't evolve. So that's been a lot of how are they going to do that? Well, part of that is digital initiatives that they're all undertaking. Some of it is using the digital initiatives to get better understanding of the analytics. And then that translates into some of them are going to more of a service-based model. and then the analytics involved in how they become a service-based model. And then they reference that as being sticky to the customer, just like we would want to do as a business, right? How do we stay where the customer has to use you throughout their entire organization? So there's all of that happening to our clients. It's across all industries. And then as tax advisors, that's significant opportunity for us to help them be strategically involved in those.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So on top of all that we've talked about, the other element you and I have spent time talking about is things like energy transition, where companies are rethinking sort of different areas of their services or evolving services they're delivering in light of sort of energy transition. So there's just so much going on right now for companies to deal with that. And it's almost like a little ball of clay when you start to think about what you can do from a tax standpoint around that and achieve some of your tax objectives by attaching to that stuff.
Absolutely. Climate, energy transitions, geopolitical pressures, all of those things are changing the way that they're doing business. And as they're changing the way they're doing business, as you know, there's significant tax implications that could be positive or negative depending on when the tax department's involved. And so it's helping them be involved with those business changes, helping them understand what risks they can mitigate, the opportunity that they're trying to drive. Because in today's environment, it's so much different than what we dealt with historically, which was old world thinking of, I have IP, that's where all my value is, that's how I'm going to drive value in the organization. And so the way the tax department used to be referenced is if we're going to put something in Switzerland, it's a tax project, right? Yeah. It's helping the whole organization redefine the value chain, understand what that means with the tax overlap, and then just getting them involved on the front end. So again, it may involve some offshoring, it may not involve the offshoring depending on what that business realignment looks like.
Yeah, so well said. Let's add a catalyst event to that. We've got Pillar 2 happening around the world right now. I'm sure that comes up in a lot of these discussions.
It goes back to the beginning of what you asked me on what was a common theme with the organization. So yes, our tax departments have compliance, they have provision, they have significant business disruption, and then, oh, by the way, Pillar 2 is happening to them all simultaneously. Yeah. And so one of our great clients who was here referenced it as, you know what, we don't have the bandwidth or the ability to handle all of this as a tax department. There's just too much coming at them too fast. So then it becomes, well, what's my highest and best use? Where can I drive the most value? And their example was, I might just have to get a C in some of these things because I don't have time to deal with all this. Now on the Pillar 2 front, obviously we're well aware that we can help them with the compliance and the quantitative and the reporting aspects of that. So I think as advisors, we can help them to be strategic and provide those services, but they also are responsible for that themselves. Yeah. And some of these companies are in, again, 50, 100, 150 countries, and it's just a lot of complexity that Pillar 2 brings into every single thing we're doing, whether that's transactional with an M&A environment, or it's business change as you're moving your supply chain or you're redeveloping your value chain. All of that has significant Pillar 2 impacts, which on the front end can be a very good thing if we're involved and help them understand it. On the back end, again, it could be very dangerous and problematic.
Yeah, so maybe pulling this all together, we've got really dynamic business environment, a lot of external factors driving that stuff. There's a ton of opportunity for tax to play a key role driving strategy. Pillar 2 is a bit of a catalyst. Like, maybe to finish, what are some best practices you're seeing as we talk to our clients around how to get involved in that and how to make sure tax is pulled along in those strategic priorities?
And again, I'll reference some of the things we talked about in our panel yesterday, and one of the common themes was get involved early and understand the business yourself as a tax department. So us, obviously, as advisors, we're telling our partners and our teams, you better understand the business more than just the historic attributes. Yeah. But the clients have the same mindset, so they have to understand what are we going through as an organization so that when they get the deck that's telling them this is the business change that's happening, they've already started to think about it and then can more quickly adapt and provide the tax insight and advice as they're going through those business changes. So number one, know your own company. It seems simple, but the historic tax departments at clients and within our firm haven't had to do that as much as they have to do today. So to be successful in today's environment, internal and external, you have to understand the business more than you ever have before and then understand those changes. So number one thing that we pulled out of our panel yesterday. The number two thing is, again, because there's so much going on, be strategic in where you're using your time and your resources because they have many competing priorities, and a lot of our public clients, obviously, the provision is extremely important to the public statement. So they have to focus on that, where they can outsource and leverage other, service providers to do some of the compliance and help with the Pillar 2 quantitative stuff. I think that's strategic for those tax departments to use that so that then they can also be more involved in the business changes and add value to their organizations.
Yeah, I mean, there's cost-cutting initiatives going on at the same time, so being strategic around how you utilize
How you
those
spend
resources.
your money that you have available and where's the most valuable way to do that too.
That's a great point. Well, thank you very much for going through this with me. It's a really exciting time. I say this all the time. It's an amazing time to be a tax professional right now. We're literally watching what the role of a tax leader is and how it morphs in the current business climate, so it's really pretty cool. So glad you guys did that panel, glad you were willing to share some of that here, and we'll talk to you, I'm sure, in the future on the topic.
Okay, thank you for having me.